Hey everyone, Ghost Keyboard here. In today's video, we are diving deep into the upcoming Steam Machine, breaking down its hardware specs and analyzing the performance potential based on everything I've been able to gather so far. We will compare it head-to-head with some of the most powerful mini PCs on the market, including models like the Minisforum HX99G, G7PT, Atom, and G1 Pro, and even the PS5 Pro for a broader perspective. I will also touch on how it stacks up against mini PCs with eGPU setups, especially when it comes to price and performance. Then we will shift gears and take a closer look at the build quality, the case size, cooling system, fan dimensions, port selection, and upgrade options for storage and RAM. Once we have established a realistic performance estimate, I will show you actual gameplay tests to give you a clear idea of what kind of FPS and graphics settings you can expect. And finally, we will wrap up with a balanced look at the pros and cons of the Steam Machine, what makes it exciting, and where it might fall short. Let's get started. First things first, let's take a closer look at the Steam Machine's hardware, starting with the CPU. The processor is built around AMD's Zen 4 architecture, featuring 6 cores and 12 threads with a boost clock reaching up to 4.8 GHz. According to Steam's product launch page, this machine isn't just for gaming, it's a full-fledged PC that supports both Linux distributions and Windows OS via official dual boot support. So what does this CPU actually correspond to in today's market? After digging through specs, I found a near-perfect match, the AMD Ryzen 5 7640HS. It's also based on Zen 4 with the same core and thread count and a slightly higher boost clock of 5.0 GHz. So is Steam's claim that this is a real PC, not just a gaming box, actually true from a CPU perspective? In my opinion, yes. The chip inside is essentially a variant of the AMD Ryzen 5 7640HS, a laptop-class CPU built on Zen 4 performance cores. I've tested the 7640HS myself in the Paladin 4 mini PC, and it's a snappy performer, even at its base clock of 4.3 GHz. For benchmark fans, you can expect single-core scores in Cinebench R24 to land somewhere between 90 and 95 points. But here's the catch, the Steam Machine's version runs at a lower TDP, which means multi-core performance will likely take a hit, lower power draw usually translates to slower multitasking and occasional lag under heavier loads. And when you pair that with just 16 gigabytes of RAM, well, that's where things start to feel tight. Sure, 16 gigabytes is fine for gaming and general use, but for tasks like video editing or heavy multitasking, it's a bottleneck. Honestly, 16 gigabytes in 2026, come on. Should we blame the recent spike in RAM prices? Maybe. But the real issue is that the RAM is soldered, no upgrade path. You're locked in, and that limitation could come back to bite you down the line. Okay, now let's move on to the graphics power of the Steam Machine. It's equipped with a custom GPU built on AMD's RDNA 3 architecture, paired with older GDDR6 VRAM. And here is where one of the biggest letdowns comes in. The GPU offers only 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Just like the 16 gigabyte system RAM, 8 gigabytes of VRAM doesn't feel future-proof in 2026. This limitation becomes even more obvious when you compare the Steam Machine's GPU hardware to what's already available in the mini PC market. Competing devices are shipping with far more headroom, making this spec look dated right out of the gate. That said, there is a silver lining. When I look at the Steam Machine, I see something closer to a mini PC or a mini ITX Cube. The small form factor is definitely there, and that's a huge pro. Compact design with console-like simplicity is appealing, but it comes at the cost of raw GPU muscle. Now, let's move on to some realistic comparisons. In this spreadsheet, I have lined up the Steam Machine against several low to mid-tier mini PCs that are already available on the market. Right away, we can see the Steam Machine's CPU looks weak compared to models like the Atom G1 Pro or the G7PT. Those systems are equipped with top-tier AMD laptop processors offering 16 performance cores, 32 threads, 4 times the L3 cache, and much higher TDP. Even the HX99G's CPU outclasses what the Steam Machine is packing. Shifting to the GPU side, we can compare compute units, one of the most reliable specs for gauging gaming performance. The Steam Machine sits at the bottom of the ranking, despite having the same 28 compute units as the HX99G's RX 6600M. The difference really comes down to performance core count. The Steam Machine has 2 fewer performance cores than the HX99G processor, and that gap drags its estimated performance below the HX99G on the chart. Now, looking at the GPU side, the Steam Machine does have the advantage of a more recent RDNA 3 architecture, while the HX99G's RX 6600M is based on RDNA 2. But here's the reality: newer architecture doesn't automatically mean a huge leap in performance. In fact, when I compare the RDNA 3 base 7600M XT against the RDNA 2 base 6600M, the performance difference isn't that dramatic. That tells us the Steam Machine's GPU, despite being newer, won't necessarily deliver a big jump over the HX99G in real-world gaming. So, with specs this close, we can estimate the Steam Machine will perform in the same ballpark as the HX99G. And here's the issue: Steam is advertising the system as capable of 4K gaming with FSR. Yes, they managed to put 4K in the marketing message, but in reality, that claim has very little truth behind it. Now let's add some fun by throwing the PS5 Pro into the spreadsheet. Steam is clearly targeting gamers, and the PS5 Pro audience is a huge part of that market. On paper, the PS5 Pro has more cores, but remember, those are older Zen 2 cores, so in raw CPU terms, the Steam Machine actually comes out ahead. But here's the thing: with the PS5 Pro, the CPU doesn't really matter. The GPU is where the PS5 Pro plays in a completely different league. With 60 compute units and full ray tracing support, its graphics performance is on another level. And let's be honest, the PS5 Pro is the only device in this lineup that truly delivers 4K gaming. I know Linus pretended to be surprised that the PS5 Pro outperforms the Steam Machine in his video, but come on, that was pure acting. Nobody should be shocked here. The reality is simple: the PS5 Pro offers the best bang for your buck when it comes to gaming quality, and to reason for that. Sony sells the console at a loss, just like they've done for generations, and makes their profits back on games. That's a business model none of these mini PCs or the Steam Machine can replicate. Okay, now let's move on to the gameplay tests. I will be running benchmarks using the Minisforum HX99G, which is without a doubt the closest system in terms of performance to the Steam Machine. I will also include gameplay footage from a system equipped with the AMD RX 7600M XT to give you a performance range, a fork that helps estimate where the Steam Machine will land. The FPS and settings you're seeing here are a realistic preview of what to expect from the Steam Machine. Based on the specs, it's positioned as a 1080p high native graphics system for most AAA titles. The actual frame rates you will get should fall within a 15% margin of what's shown here, but keep in mind, the Steam Machine's lower CPU TDP and reduced performance core count will likely push its graphics performance slightly below these gameplay examples. Now that we have covered the Steam Machine's estimated gaming performance, let's talk about its build quality. From what I am seeing, this is essentially a mini PC laptop-grade hardware packed into a small form factor. One design choice I really dislike is the integrated PSU. There are two main reasons for that. First, if the PSU dies, the entire system is out of commission. It's not like you can just grab a replacement power brick off Amazon. Second, and regardless of what Linus says about cooling, an internal PSU adds extra heat inside the case. Speaking of cooling, based on the snippets I've seen, the Steam Machine uses a large, thick heat sink paired with a vapor chamber, which is a step up from traditional heat pipes. It also features a custom fan that appears to be a 120mm unit, but noticeably thicker than standard retail fans. It's a blade-style fan, which typically runs louder than centrifugal designs. Overall cooling performance remains unknown. Will it be loud and hot, or cool and quiet? That's still a mystery. One thing that concerns me is the lack of visible air vents on the side panels. Airflow design is questionable. And with only a single cooling fan, I am also wondering about thermal management for the RAM and SSD. These components are sensitive to heat, and without dedicated cooling, that's a potential issue. Now let's look at the port selection, and unfortunately, it's a letdown. No Thunderbolt 4, no USB 4, and no HDMI 2.1. Compare that to the Minisforum G7 PT, which includes all of those plus Wi-Fi 7. I have seen that model listed for around $1,000 on Amazon, with 32 gigabytes of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. That's a serious value proposition. So let's talk about the estimated price of the Steam Machine. Early on, Linus and others mentioned $700, but now I am seeing numbers closer to $900. And this matters. Even at $700, Steam isn't losing money on the hardware. If Minisforum can sell a system with 32 gigabytes of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD at that price and still make a profit, then Valve can too. In fact, I think $700 or even lower is realistic. At $650, a lot of people would be happy. Of course, my fellow Europeans will probably pay an extra $100, and in the UK it's likely at least $200 more. I feel your pain. Would I buy a Steam Machine at $650? Absolutely at $900, hell no. Now, let's wrap up with the pros and cons for SteamOS enthusiasts and hardcore Steam gamers. This machine is a must-have. It's designed to keep you fully inside the Steam ecosystem: SteamOS, Steam Machine, SteamVR, Steam Games, Steam Controller. Everything works together seamlessly, no compatibility headaches. And let's be honest, the design is cool, the loading light, the Valve logo, it's a slick-looking device. But at $900, you're overpaying for what you get. The PS5 Pro is still way ahead in terms of bang for buck, and for tech-savvy builders, it makes more sense to stick with what you have or build your own gaming rig for less. And that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please hit like, drop a comment, and most importantly, subscribe. Thanks to everyone supporting the channel. Without you, the viewers, this channel wouldn't exist.